Well, hi everyone. Thanks so much for registering for our webinar. We're really excited to have you. We hope you walk away feeling really inspired and excited to expand your online business overseas. So I'm Jess. I'm a lawyer in the commercial contracts team here at LegalVision. I do lots of work assisting online and e-commerce businesses. So I'm going to hand over to Phil. He'll introduce himself and yeah, we'll get into the webinar.
Thanks, Jess. Really exciting to be here today. Hi, everyone. I'm Phil De Winter. I head up the partnerships team for Airwallex. For those of you who don't know Airwallex, we're one of Australia's, success stories when it comes to fintech. We've been around sort of 5 or 6 years, have raised, quite a lot of money. We're one of the fastest growing fintech companies in Australia, and really allowing businesses to operate cross-border. So I'm really excited to be here today and talk about ways that you can help expand your business globally. So I'll quickly talk you through the agenda for the day. So first off, we're going to just quickly look at some insights into expanding your business globally, and then really take a bit of a deep dive on the do's and don'ts of global expansion. I think it's a bit of a challenging one, and often people make some rookie errors. So we'll talk through ways to avoid that, and then I'll hand over to Jess, and she's going to take you through the legal minefield that is dealing with multiple legislations and different laws and local regions and all the fun stuff. So that will be the end, and then from there we'll go into a Q&A, and please do hang around post the Q&A. Both LegalVision and Airwallex have some special offers for everyone, so hopefully you're all excited about that, and I think there'll be some offers there that will be valuable for your businesses. So yeah, please do hang around to the end to make sure you get access to those special offers. Cool. So why don't we jump into I guess a bit of a quick overview, and I think firstly, congrats to everyone on this call to begin with. There's over 100 people on this call already, and probably if you've joined this call, you're interested in expanding your business globally, and I think that's a real kudos to all of you. It takes a bit of guts to do that, particularly in today's world with borders the way they are. To be looking at expanding your business globally has its challenges, but from what we see on a daily basis, the opportunity is there, right? I think if you looked at just today, it was Canva raised a new round of funding on I think it was a $52 billion Aussie valuation, and there's no way that they could have done that if they were just focusing on the Australian market. And this graph that we've got here, or the map that we've got here, is really just taking a look at the e-com market. But you can see Australia's got a $27 billion e-com market here, but if you start looking at America and Europe, and that doesn't even include a lot of the other major markets, the opportunity is 20x, or in Europe's case, sorry, in America's case, even bigger than that, right? So my favorite stat is I lived in the States for a while, and I'll talk you through that in a minute. But when I was living there, someone once told me that the GDP of California is, I think, 2 to 3 times the size of Australia. So just with one state in America, that's the opportunity that exists. And so move on to the next slide and talk through just how I guess ambitious it shows that all of you being on this call. So this is the top 20 countries in the world that are looking at expanding their local businesses globally. It kind of looks like Australia there has 8%. That's actually the Philippines. So Australia doesn't even rank in the top 20 for businesses here that are looking to expand their business globally. We've got a raft of amazing businesses in the Australian economy. And the fact that so many of them are thinking local gives everyone on this call today a real competitive advantage as they look to expand their business overseas. So I guess just to summarize, that the opportunity is massive. We all know that. I think Australians are a bit conservative often when it comes to expanding their business overseas, and well done again on everyone for being here and considering that strategy for their business. Cool. So we'll jump into some do's and don'ts. I'll tell you a story with the first one. So my previous role, I headed up the sales team for a company called FanHub. It was a sports tech business, and I opened the office for FanHub in the UK, and then went to the US and did the same in New York. And When I got to New York, the first task I had was we need to open up a bank account. I spent a week in a Chase branch, and I was physically there, right? At the moment, we can't even physically get there. I spent a week in a Chase branch trying to open up a bank account. After a week, I was told, look, you're fully owned by an Australian parent entity. Sorry, we can't take your business. Then spent another week in HSBC. I think I did about 150 pages of paperwork. Eventually got a bank account open, but then it became a nightmare from transferring money from Australia to the HSBC account, and it was really an admin minefield. So one thing that we've done at Airwallex is give you the ability to open up bank accounts in all the major markets around the world instantly. So I think when you're looking to expand globally, and you do need to be able to have bank accounts in different regions for various reasons, I'd really do your research at what's the best solution for you to do that. Obviously, I'm biased. I think Airwallex is the best solution, but go out and do your research. There are lots of tech providers these days that have made this a lot easier, and there's a lot of advantages than going through the sort of traditional banking system. The second question is how are you paying employees and contractors based overseas? There's not a chat functionality in this conversation today. At least you can ask questions, but it's not a two-way chat functionality. I was going to ask, who's doing that with the major banks in Australia at the moment? And I think for anyone that's been paying staff overseas using, I won't name them, but some of the big banks, you're probably getting hit with some serious fees to do so, and particularly when you're just starting out, right? You're like, okay, I need to pay 1 or 2 contractors in America, or 1 or 2 contractors in the Philippines, or wherever it might be, and all of a sudden you're getting half the salaries, or a quarter of their salaries on a monthly basis. You're getting hit with fees. And so again, make sure that you go out there and do your research on what are the best FX solutions for you as you go to expand overseas. And how can you make sure that you're saving costs in doing so? Because being able to do that, you can invest in your marketing strategy going overseas, or more staff, or whatever it is. So it's really important you're looking to reduce your cost base as you do it. It's pretty similar when we talk about buying stock, right? Same kind of thing. Most people, if you've got some sort of e-com business or physical goods business, the likelihood is that you're not making your stock in Australia. You're making it in China, Philippines, India, wherever it may be. And again, when you are looking to expand your supply chains overseas, how do you do that in the most economical way, and a way that's going to really save you serious dollars in order to expand your business? Cool. Let's move on to the next slide. Cool. So I think we look at global expansion these days a little bit differently to maybe some other businesses. I think most businesses on this call, I'm going to assume, are spending with US tech companies, right? So whether it's you've got Facebook ads, AWS spend, you're spending on Google, Slack, Zoom. There's a myriad of different US tech platforms that everyone is using these days. I think most people wouldn't consider that global business, and they just think it's sort of BAU things that they do every day. But what a lot of businesses don't realize is that the local banks here do treat that as global business and international business. And when you're paying for those transactions on your local banking cards, often you'll be charged a 3% fee just to pay for your Facebook ads, which seems ridiculous, right? Like the bill might even be in AUD, but because Facebook bill, the merchant of record is in Ireland, you get smashed with this 3% fee. And there are businesses out there spending hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars on Facebook ads or other US tech spend, and then getting smashed with these fees. So again, there are ways around that. We released a cards product late last year, and that's been a real cost saver for a lot of our customers to get around this 3% fee. And again, you talk about a $100,000 Facebook marketing budget, all of a sudden you've got an extra $3 grand a month or 35 grand a year to then go spend on more marketing and acquiring customers and actually growing your business, opposed to just hitting costs and expenses that really add no value. So definitely be evaluating your US tech spend as you look to grow. I think the last thing that we see a lot of mistakes currently, and to be honest, there wasn't really a good solution till recently on this one, is if you're selling in global markets, and particularly online, e-com type sorts of businesses, you know, a lot of the traditional players like Stripe or PayPal will ensure that when you are making a transaction online, and let's say you're an Australian business, you're selling, you made a sale to a US customer in USD, Stripe won't let you, or PayPal won't let you hold that USD. You've got to force convert that money back to Australia, and in order to do so, they charge you pretty exorbitant fees in order to get that money back to Australia. And again, like, it's something that until recently, that was just the cost of doing business overseas. We released a payment gateway about a month ago now that gets around that problem, where you can sell in all these different currencies, hold in those different currencies, and there's no international transaction fees along the way, which is a real cost saver for businesses that are, you know, selling globally. So whether that's something you're doing today, whether that's something you know, you're looking to do in the future, it's really worth assessing the options that you have when making international sales. So just to summarize all of that, and I know there was a bit of content there, I think as you go to expand globally, if you don't get your financial infrastructure right early on, one, it's a real pain to change later, but two, you're going to incur, you know, a significant amount of costs early on, and those costs will prohibit you from actually successfully expanding into those global markets. If all of a sudden you're paying, you know, 5 to 10% on top line revenue for you know, more than you need to on every dollar that you make, then it becomes quite tough to be competitive in those markets, and it, you know, often will result in businesses having to, you know, pull back their global expansion because they just can't succeed and can't be competitive. So when you are looking to assess how do I go to market overseas, it's really worth doing your research early, getting the infrastructure in place from the outset, and then allowing you to have the platform to successfully expand into global markets. So I'll leave you with that, and throw over to Jess. Maybe before I throw over to Jess, a little fun fact on Jess. She has spent lockdown mastering Ottolenghi's dessert recipes, and she promised me that she was going to send me some brownies post this call, and she said whoever gives the best question today is also going to get some brownies from Jess. So I suggest yeah, get some good questions.
I'll do my best, Phil. Thanks for that. Okay, so I want to run you through some of the legal things that I think you should be thinking about when expanding your business overseas. So the first one is making sure that your terms and conditions are watertight. So your T's and C's are important for quite a few reasons. They're going to deal with payments, the scope and inclusions of the goods and services you sell. They're going to deal with refunds, warranties, limitations to your liabilities. And while it can be tempting, you know, there are sort of free, you know, templates that you can rip off from another business. We don't really recommend doing that, you know, because that's another business. They do things differently to you. They'll deal with payments and refunds differently. They might offer different warranties. And also there are Australian laws which need to be addressed in your T's and C's, even when you're selling overseas. So I'm sure we've all personally dealt with delivery delays over the past 18 months. You know, our lockdown-inspired online purchases have come many weeks later than we expected them to come, and in some instances they've been cancelled. So when you're expanding overseas, you really need to think about the suppliers and the service providers that you're dealing with, including delivery companies. These overseas suppliers are going to be affected by things outside of their control. So, and this is going to have an impact on your business. So your T's and C's need to contain a clause, often called a force majeure clause, which basically explains what happens if something outside of your control happens. So like a pandemic or a government restriction or a natural disaster. So what a clear, what a force majeure clause will do is basically give you the option to vary your obligations under the contract. So for example, if you promise that you'd deliver your goods on time, but you're not able to do that, the force majeure clause will explain what happens when you can't do that because you're affected by, say, a natural disaster. So they're just a couple of things that need to go into your terms and conditions. But a question we get asked a lot is, do I need a new contract or a new set of T's and C's for each country in which I'm selling? That's going to get kind of complicated and maybe expensive. It is hard to answer that question definitively because it's going to depend on, you know, how many countries you've expanded to, the extent of your presence in that country, and whether you've set up like different overseas entities from which you run your business. What we'd recommend doing is starting with the, you know, Australian version, like a really solid contract drafted in Australia. And then if you're aiming to build up your presence in an overseas country, you know, get a lawyer from that country to review the document and sort of prepare country-specific sections or update the contract so it's specific for that country. So along with your T's and C's, you'll also need a privacy policy. This is going to set out how personal information is handled by your business. So as I mentioned before, you're going to be using third parties when you run your business, you know, payment providers, delivery providers, and you'll need to set out who these providers are and why you're sharing information with them. So your privacy policy really needs to be, you know, relevant, up to date, and easy to understand. And I'll speak a bit later about some privacy and sort of other laws which you'll need to think about when expanding overseas. Okay, so let's have a chat about the Australian consumer law. So why are we talking about the ACL when, you know, thinking about expanding our business overseas? Okay, so the ACL is going to apply to you if you run a business in Australia, and it's also going to apply to you if you're based in Australia and you expand overseas. The ACL gives protection to Australian, you know, people in Australia, but also to Australian citizens who are based overseas. So what is a consumer? A consumer is not just a person. It also includes a business who buys or hires goods or services for up to $100,000. So it's actually a really high threshold. You know, your consumers aren't just you know, individuals, that they can be businesses too. And consumers under the ACL are given, you know, a number of protections. So one of these is the protection from unfair contract terms. So we're talking about clauses that try and exclude the service provider's obligations altogether. They're also protected from well, they're offered the consumer guarantees. So in the case of goods or products, they need to be, you know, of good quality. They need to be fit for purpose. They need to match any description that you give to them. They need to come with full title and ownership so that the buyer actually knows that they own the goods they're buying. And services, they need to, you know, they also need to be as described. They need to be fit for purpose. They need to be provided with care and skill, and they need to be provided within a reasonable time. So if these guarantees aren't met, consumers have a number of sort of rights. So they'll get the right to, you know, a repair, replacement, or refund for goods. Or when we're talking about services, they'll get the right to some compensation or to, you know, have the services re-performed. Something that's not so relevant for international expansion, but I do want to point it out, is that if you are selling to any consumers in New South Wales, and remember consumers, you know, includes, you know, a large group of people and businesses, some recent laws have come into play. So this is for New South Wales consumers. If you're notifying, in your T's and C's or before your consumers actually accept your T's and C's, you'll need to notify them of any substantially prejudicial terms in your contract. So basically, you'll have to point out to them any clauses which are sort of way more in your favour and possibly prejudicial. Okay, so businesses bound by the ACL, and remember that's you if you're an Australian business, but you're also expanding overseas. They're also prohibited from carrying out misleading and deceptive conduct. So an example of this is claiming that the goods you sell have certain, you know, qualities or characteristics that they don't actually have, or telling consumers that they don't have a right to a refund in any circumstances. So this is misleading and deceptive conduct, and you're not allowed to do this if you need to comply with the ACL, which, as I mentioned, a lot of you probably will. Okay, so another question is, do online businesses who are overseas but they sell into Australia, do they need to comply with the ACL? So the answer is yes, if they carry on a business in Australia. So what is carrying on a business? There are a few things that can indicate that you carry on a business in Australia. So for example, having a significant customer base in Australia, so if you have a really large revenue stream in Australia, or having property or warehouses in Australia. So yeah, I think it's helpful to just cover some of the obligations that you'll have if your business is based in Australia. You need to comply with the ACL, and so that is something that you need to keep front of mind even when expanding overseas. And I'll touch a bit later on. Well, yeah, I think it's important to remember that you may also have to comply with overseas-based consumer laws as well. Okay, so let's speak about distribution agreements. A big, significant hurdle when expanding overseas is organising your supply chain. If you're like a mostly or wholly online business, maybe this won't be as much of an issue. If you're a SaaS provider, for example, software as a service, you might, you probably don't need a distribution agreement, but you might engage overseas resellers to sort of sell your SaaS. For now, we'll be speaking about distribution arrangements for the supply of goods, but if you do have SaaS questions, feel free to put them in. Okay, so if you're selling online, theoretically you could sell all around the world. I think, yeah, the world's your oyster. But if breaking into overseas markets is a challenge, you might choose to develop partnerships with overseas distributors who really know their market. They have, good customer relationships in place already. So if you've done the steps of working out that you have enough products to export and supply to those overseas markets, then you're going to need a really good distribution agreement in place. So what do we actually, what do we actually see in a distribution agreement? Your distributors are going to have a lot of responsibilities. They're really representing your business. They're going to make sure that when you're emerging overseas that you do so successfully. So the agreement needs to cover how payment's going to flow. Is payment flowing from your customer to the distributor, or is it more complicated than that? And then how does your distributor pay you? Are there going to be, or are you paying your distributor? There's lots of different ways of doing it. Are there going to be restrictions on your distributors? Where can they sell to? How can they sell? Are they restricted from selling in particular territories or in particular regions, or restricted from selling in particular online stores? You should think about whether it's an exclusive arrangement. Are you working with just the one distributor, or are you working with lots of distributors? And you should also think about the fact that you're going to be licensing your branding and your IP to those distributors in order for them to represent you. And distributors also might offer sort of additional services beyond just distributing your products. They might do additional promotions and branding, and they might manage customer relationships. Okay, so I want to touch on a few sort of international laws. Obviously, there's a whole world of international laws out there which might apply, but I want to touch on a few that you should be thinking about, or at least some areas which have country-specific laws and which you should be seeking advice on. Okay. So the first one is, as I mentioned, consumer law. As you can see, Australia has pretty robust consumer protection laws. Consumers are very well protected, and businesses can be fined for breaching their ACL obligations. So when you're thinking about expanding overseas, it's definitely worth, depending on the extent to which you're focusing on that particular country, it's worth seeking some advice from overseas as to whether you need to comply with those overseas laws. Okay, so privacy is a really big one. It's sort of front of everyone's mind at the moment, I think. Okay, so Australia has its own set of privacy laws. Many businesses need to comply with the Australian Privacy Act. And so if we have a look at businesses that have expanded overseas and then you have a look at their privacy policy, you might see that it actually has sections that deal specifically with the laws or requirements of each specific country in which the business operates. The Australian Privacy Act gives individuals a number of particular rights. So the right to unsubscribe from email marketing, the right to access and correct any information the business holds about them. And so what an Australian privacy policy will do, it'll include the requirements under the Australian Privacy Act, and it'll also set out what rights Australians have under the Australian Privacy Act. So if you've expanded to other countries and you're complying with their overseas laws, yeah, you might have that one base privacy policy and then addendums that deal with the overseas laws. So a good example is the GDPR. So if you're considering expanding to Europe, you've probably heard of the GDPR, and that's the privacy regulation which protects individuals in Europe. Well, protects the personal data of individuals in Europe. People in Europe are really well protected by the GDPR. One of their many rights is the right to data erasure, or the right to be forgotten. So if you're a business that needs to comply with the GDPR or decides to opt in, you're going to have a number of obligations. You need to really rigorously assess how you're processing personal data, and you need to determine or decide on a legal basis each time you process personal data. You need to respond to individuals' requests when they sort of want to access their rights. For example, if they want to access that right to have their data erased, and you need to deal with privacy data breaches in a particular way. So there's lots of obligations that you'll have if you need to comply with the GDPR. So yeah, certainly with privacy and consumer law, I really recommend seeking some specific advice on those particular laws. And just a couple more things. So I'll touch on tax. It's obviously it's a complicated area, but how you're going to be taxed really depends on so many things. So it depends on your business structure. It depends on which countries you're selling to. It's going to if you've got an Australian entity and you're just selling overseas, that's going to impact how you're taxed. Or if you've actually set up a separate separate foreign subsidiary, that's going to impact how you're taxed. So yeah, certainly recommend seeking advice in the countries that you're going to be operating. And this relates to business structuring as well. So as an online business can operate from their Australian entity. That's not a problem, but you might choose to set up overseas entities in the countries that you're expanding to. Definitely worth getting some guidance on how to do that and whether it's worthwhile for you. Something to think about with your business structure is your industry. So certain industries and certain particularly regulated industries, they're going to require that if you offer that service in that country, that you have a particular structure in place. So, you might need to set up a company overseas if you offer certain goods or services overseas. And then I'll just touch on the importance of protecting your branding. Your branding is so precious to your business. It's the face of your business. It's what people recognize. And so I like to hope that most of you have an Australian trademark already for your name or your logo or both, and you'd know that takes a long time. But yeah, it's certainly a good idea to start thinking early about which countries you're really focusing on, and then getting some trademark protection in those countries. There are certain, you can file a trademark application directly to certain countries. And there are also these sort of multiple application processes where you can sort of file a trademark application in multiple countries. Easier. And yeah, as I said, it can take many months. If you've registered in Australia, you know it takes months. So I'd recommend thinking early about your branding. So yeah, they're the sort of legal things we wanted to touch on. So let's get into the Q&A. We've had a number of questions come through both prior to the webinar and just in the past 30 minutes. So we'll do our best to answer these questions. I think, yeah, there were a number of tax and overseas law questions, which we love, but they're hard to answer sort of generally. So we can definitely put you in touch with someone for those. So, Phil, is there a question there that you'd like to start off by answering?
Yeah, sure. So someone wrote in and asked, does your business need a tax file registration number in each foreign country to open a bank account there? So I gave my story before of opening up a bank account in the US, and I didn't include the details of having to get the tax file number prior to that. It was equally as much of a nightmare. I think that process took 2 or 3 months to get it across the line. That is one of the beauties with Airwallex. So you sign up as an Australian entity, you go through what we call the KYC, or know your customer process, once at the outset. And then once you sign up to the platform, you can open up a bank account in all these different major markets, literally with a click of a button. No more details needed to be added. So once you've signed up, if you want to open up a bank account or an account in the US, it's about a 10-second process. Same in the UK, same in Europe, Hong Kong, and many other major markets. So I think the answer is depends which bank you go with or which provider you go with. But depending on that decision, you don't necessarily need to have a tax file number in every market. Jess, do you want to go to the next one, or?
Yeah, I'll answer one. So someone's asking about drop shipping and, particularly drop shipping with a number of drop shipping partners. So I think that's a really good question, because drop shipping is a great way to expand overseas. So if you're not aware of what drop shipping is, I'll give a brief summary. Usually an e-commerce or online business will warehouse or sort of store all the items that they're going to sell, and when a customer places an order, it goes from the business's warehouse straight to the customer. With drop shipping, the e-commerce business doesn't actually process those items or that inventory. So when a customer places an order, the e-commerce business sends the request to their dropshipping partner, and the dropshipping partner warehouse and then prepares and ships the order to the customer. And so that's obviously a really great thing to do, so that especially when you're starting, so that you don't have to house heaps of inventory and stock. So yes, you may well have drop shipping arrangements with different partners, and you should definitely have a contract in place with each of them. It's going to talk about their obligations, the billing process, the product returns. I think a specific part of this question is it sort of relates to intellectual property, and we certainly don't want drop shipping partners to do anything that's illegal, is going to get us into trouble. So we need to make sure that in the drop shipping agreement, not only should we do our due diligence and make sure we're working with a good dropshipping partner, but we also need to make sure that there's warranties and promises from the partner that they are authorized to sell these products, and that by doing so, they're not breaching any other party's rights or stealing anyone's IP by selling those rights. Yeah, so certainly a good idea to, drop shipping is a great idea. Make sure you have those agreements in place with your partners, and remember that you should have the drop shipping agreement with the drop shipping partner, but you should also have your customer T's in place with customer T's and C's in place with your customers. So if something goes wrong, you are responsible for that, and your customer's going to come to you to seek a refund or make a complaint. So I think that's a really sort of good option when thinking about expanding overseas, because there are drop shipping sort of companies all around the world.
We're definitely.
Phil, is there another one?
Well, yeah, I was just going to
Sorry?
say we're heaps of drop shipping companies at the moment. It's a growing trend and something that we're quite passionate about. So yeah, it's a really cool business model, and definitely encourage it for those investigating. I was probably going to answer two questions, hopefully two birds with one stone in the next one. Someone asked, what's the cost of Airwallex, and another question was, can you accept US investment? Or US dollar investment from US companies. So the answer to both of those questions, well, the first question is Airwallex is free to use. It doesn't cost anything to sign up. And let's say you wanted to open up a bank account in the US, that's also free. And one of the only ways Airwallex makes money is on international transactions. So for example, if you did receive that US investment that someone asked about, and you can do that, you could get your US investor to deposit the money straight into the US account. Then when you were to convert that back to AUD in Australia, there would be a 0.3% fee on that. But if you wanted to keep it in USD and spend US dollars, there's no fees at all to do that. So hopefully that answers both of those questions in one shot. I think you may be on mute there, Jess. Just while she's going off mute, just a reminder as well to hang around. There's a special offer coming at the end of the Q&A from both LegalVision and Airwallex. So back to you, Jess. No, still can't hear you. Why don't I'll keep going whilst Jess is working on her audio. One question was, someone asked if you can pay to Nepal. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure on Nepal. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn or email me at phillip.dewinter@airwallex.com, and I'll get you an answer on that. We support, I know, over 90 different currencies that you can pay in and markets you can pay into. I just, to be honest, not 100% sure on Nepal. So I will come back to you on that one. Jess, do you want to do a quick audio check, or should I keep going? No, I'll keep going. Cool. Last question was, can
Phil,
Airwallex...
is there another one?
Oh, yep.
Sorry?
There you go. No. I'll keep going. Can Airwallex be integrated into an app, and can we securely capture consumer banking
Speak
data
a bit about marketing.
to and from? It's a bit scratchy, but I think we've got you a little bit there, Jess. Oh, no. So yeah, the answer to that question is we can integrate it into an app in order to accept payment. We have like an API that you can plug into your app, and we can securely capture details, or credit card details that way. If you want bank details, we don't have a method that I know of at the moment to do that. We do have a scale solution that may be suitable, but again, hit me up on LinkedIn or email me your specific question, and I will go into a bit more detail on that one. Someone asked about chargebacks and disputes. To be honest, it does vary from market to market. It will depend on which territory you are in, what sort of business you are, the risk profile of your business. So maybe again, that's one to take offline, but happy to answer that post call. And I think Jess, we've got you. So take it away. I've been going for a few minutes.
Sorry, is that working?
Yep.
Awesome. I'm very sorry, everybody. I mean, we can always count on a tech glitch, can't we, on an online webinar? Okay, so one of these questions here is asking about marketplaces. So yeah, similar to, well, not similar to dropshipping, but I guess a similar sentiment is that marketplaces are another really incredible way to expand globally. You can bring in, buyers and sellers, or service providers and customers from all around the world. And so it's really going to depend on what sort of marketplace you're offering, and how many or how much involvement you're going to have in the relationship between the parties on your marketplace. Are you just providing a place for the parties to meet, or are you going to be really facilitating payment and facilitating the buying and the selling of goods or services on your marketplace? and if you are facilitating payments, you're going to have to use a payment processor for that, and you're going to have to think about, how you deal with things like refunds and disputes. Another thing I just want to mention on marketplaces is that you, as the marketplace, you're actually providing a service, but you'll also have parties on the platform who are, providing goods and services between them. So it's important in the marketplace T's and C's that they accept that they should be promising to actually comply with the overseas, laws and regulations that apply to the sale of their goods and services. I'll do another one since you were able to answer a few in a row, Phil. Okay, so I think a really important one when selling globally is how and where should disputes be dealt with. So, your contract should certainly set out the process for dealing with disputes. If you're an Australian business, it's definitely going to be straightforward and convenient to have disputes dealt with in Australia. But if you have set up a sort of an international or overseas arm to your business, you might decide to put, say, if you've expanded to the US, you might put a US version of your contract in place that says that disputes are dealt with in the US. Obviously, if you're at that stage, I would hope that you've got a US legal team to help you with that process. So yeah, how should disputes be dealt with? I mean, we want disputes to be dealt with, commercially and simply and cheaply if possible. So the disputes clause will outline how that's done. It might say that you have to meet first and attend mediation. And then if that doesn't work, you might attend arbitration. And if you have sort of expanded globally, international arbitration is a good idea. Often customers are really happy with that because it provides a level playing field. And then depending on who the parties are in the dispute and where it's dealt with, there are international treaties which can actually make the decision of the arbitration binding in the countries. So you're not just dealing with sort of loose international laws. Let me see if there's another one here. Okay, so I mean, and a similar question is just, do we need to use the one version of the contract? Yeah, I think it's going to really depend on. I think it's very complicated to have a different version of your contract in every country in which you're selling. Try and use the Australian version, but of course, if you are really focused on a particular country, you might have an overseas version of that contract. Okay, let me just have a look. Are there any others?
Just a quick update on one of the previous questions that someone's pinged me. We can transfer to Nepal. So whoever was asking that question, let me know. One other question that would be great to answer is someone asked about Stripe and some of the more traditional payment acceptance methods or payment gateways. I won't talk about a specific company. All I'll say is that if you are selling globally, the traditional payment gateways out there typically will charge you pretty exorbitant fees to repatriate the funds. So if you sell $100 to a US customer, and then you might sort of see $5 to $6 of those dollars go in fees. Our payment gateway is a much more affordable option and something I would really encourage you to look into if you are, expanding globally or selling globally. Jess, back to you.
I think that's sort of the last question, Phil. I think we got to wrap up.
Cool, beauty. Should we go into the offers?
Yeah.
Cool. I think if we can move to the next slide, awesome. So special offer from Airwallex for those customers that sign up using that link below. So the airwallex.grsm.io/LegalVision webinar. We will give you your first $50,000 of FX for free, so no fees on your first $50,000 of FX, which is hopefully going to save some companies here some good money. I'm a mad Melbourne Demons supporter, and they're in the grand final next week. So anyone that emails proof that they're a Demons fan, will give you 100K free FX. I haven't got that approved from finance. I haven't got that approved from legal, and I'm sure LegalVision are all shaking their heads. You can't do that. Yeah, email me that, and we'll sort you out. Over to you, Jess.
Thanks. Okay, so yeah, I wanted to speak about LegalVision's special offer. So I want to tell you about Legal LVConnect Pro. So this is our core product. It's basically a membership where you can get all of your business as usual legal needs. So that's things like document drafting, document reviews, consultations, business structuring advice and setup, IP protection, employment advice. Yeah, all your business legal help and support. So LV Connect Pro guarantees cost certainty. So you're really sure of your legal spend for the next few years when you sign up to the membership. If New Zealand is one of the countries that you're thinking of expanding to, LV operates in both Australia and New Zealand. And so we've actually included New Zealand law in the LV Connect Pro offering. So yeah, after the webinar, just click yes to the pop-up or respond to the email you would have received, and you can book in a time to have a strategy session with our lawyers, and you can discuss your business and your expansion plans. Okay, well, look, that sort of ends it. We're really thankful that you've joined us all for today's webinar. Thanks so much to Phil and Airwallex. It's been great to partner with you on this, and we hope you found the webinar interesting. Sorry about the tech glitches. Yeah, we'd love to hear your feedback and any further questions that we didn't get to answer. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks. See ya.